We are another day closer to the end result in the wait-and-see game.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, and thank you so much for joining me. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 money line, any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. We have an update from Elliotte Freidman regarding the beginnings of some rumblings of testing some waters regarding three, I would say, key defensemen in this Flames organization, as well as what it means to finally be approaching this. And we will wrap up the show with a little preview of tonight's game. But before we dive into that, please make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, on YouTube. Happy to be here for you, your Calgary Flames podcast, 5 days a week. This morning, it was great. I was sitting at my desk and get the tweet notification from Elliotte Freidman that 32 Thoughts episode dropped. Love that. Makes Monday morning a little bit more bearable. And he basically said that the Flames are starting to dip their toes in the water and test the market when it comes to Noah Hanifin, Nikita Zadorov, and Chris Tanev. Those are some, obviously the pending UFAs that we have been harping on since the end of last season. And it looks like Canadian teams are the only ones that are potentially in the market right now. Elliotte Freidman says that Vancouver, Toronto, and Edmonton have some potential interest there. Now, again, we're going to talk. At the end of the summer, Nick and I did like a media literacy course, crash course for NHL media literacy, and basically like why you're hearing this from one of the top insiders in the sport versus someone else, and why Elliott's or Jeff Merrick's word holds a lot more weight than, say, someone with 6 followers. It's coming from a trustworthy source here, right? And there is a reason why they're relaying it. There is someone feeding them this information, and not in that sounds like a negative way. The information that these teams want you to find out, they'll make sure you find out about it. There's typically some sort of underlying, I don't want to say motive, because that sounds like super malicious and kind of vindictive, but it's other people are listening too. It's not just hockey fans, and people talk on the podcast, outside of the podcast. There probably are more teams, and if some team that's down a defenseman and kind of on the fence about it, they're hearing this, and maybe they're gonna call Craig Conroy and make a hey, what's it looking like, what's the best offer you got? And okay, I was thinking of maybe this could be something, and is that something of interest to you? It's all made public for a reason. That's really all I can say. But he basically says that Toronto may be kind of the front runner here. But at the same time, it's I can't imagine Craig Conroy and Brad Treliving doing business. And in the article, he goes, or on the podcast rather, he says, "I'm just saying this. I think that they've begun making their phone calls just to see what the market is. I don't necessarily think anything is happening soon, but I think that they're making their calls. If I'm Edmonton, I'm looking to make a deal that addresses my 2 problems. We are not going to get enough saves, and everybody that plays against us is going where they want to go. Dan Vladar, I offer you, well, you are an Edmonton Oiler." And I'm pulling some quotes here from the Win Columns article because they're fantastic and like transcribe this. For me to do that in Craig Conroy's shoes, not just a premium. A premium is nice. I'm talking about a deal that would get a banner hung up in the new building whenever. It can't just be a premium. If you're going to do that, and I agree with you, it's incredibly unlikely, you have to make a deal that every one of your fans will look and say, all right, I can deal with that. And then Edmonton straightens themselves out because of a deal like that. They got to say, all right, I can deal with that. I agree with you. It's unlikely, but they have the type of players that Edmonton can use. After discussing Edmonton's situation, they shifted to the Maple Leafs. And of course, the Flames come up again. I think Toronto, are looking for a defenseman. I think they have been looking for a defenseman all summer. I just think they haven't found the right mix. You know, the one that I could see is Zadorov, and I bet if they can find a way to get Zadorov and Tanev, I bet they would do it. I bet they would do both of them if Calgary was willing to do that. I really believe it. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if you showed me a path where that could occur, could see it. I don't like that. Can we keep at least one of them? I would prefer Chris Tanev because I think that he's excellent on the penalty kill. But why? My Toronto, my Edmonton. Can maybe a slightly more likable team come into the mix here, and preferably not a Western Conference or Canadian team? Thanks. But, you know, this is just the start. I hate calling it leaks because that sounds like so like Stan Twitter, but no, these things are getting out because they're meant to get out. And it's not like it's a leak where, you know, it's coming from inside the house and it's some sort of like problematic situation. This is business and it's routine. We know this. We see this every year. And that's why all of the free agent announcements are basically done at 12:01 on July 1st. But coming up next, we're going to talk about what this means in terms of the wait and see game, because I mean, they're waiting and they've seen, but is it enough for the players, their agents, and the organization to, take that next step? But before we do that, we are going to take a quick break here, and I'm going to talk to you all about one of my favorite apps, and that is FanDuel. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That is $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. You can cash out instantly. It's safe. It's super easy to use. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Thanks, everyone, for sticking around and hanging out with us on today's episode of Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're getting your podcasts, because we're here for you every day. Are we starting to see a shift? And not just because the Flames won a singular game here, right? Their win on Saturday does not define what's happening right now. If that was the case, I'd be concerned because you might be jumping the gun a little bit, either direction, right? But it feels like this is maybe where things should have been in August, earlier this summer at some point. You know, I completely understand the hold off and why the players wanted to wait and see and why they're still waiting and seeing. It feels like we are finally inching forward in terms of either moving on from UFAs or, well, we're not really considering extending anyone at the moment, right? I think those talks are still on hold. So it does feel like they're kind of choosing a direction here. And whatever direction they choose has serious impacts, right? You know, if you're signing Noah Hanifin to a $7 million deal, I love Noah Hanifin. You guys know this. You know that, hometown kid, I would say we grew up together. We did not grow up together. We grew up like 5 towns apart, and he's younger than me. But, a Massachusetts kid has come so far in his game. There's still a lot left to be desired to put that kind of price tag on him. And that's just my opinion. I think most people would agree with that. I feel like this is the first benchmark in terms of this waiting game, because 10 games into this thing, 10 or 11 games into this thing at this point, and you're starting to shake things out. You're starting to have some sort of feeling of which way things are going to go, and what your heart's telling you and what your agent's telling you. And of course, Craig Conroy has a job to do too. He doesn't just call people or pick up the phone when things are rocky. I'm sure that he gets a lot of calls, lots of emails, lots of texts regarding these guys, and maybe he was hesitant in holding those cards to his chest for a reason, and he didn't want to jump and make a move. But now, based on this first start of the season, he's going to keep looking. He's going to, kind of shop around, and there's nothing wrong with that. The timing feels appropriate. It's been 4 weeks of the NHL season thus far, and American Thanksgiving is right around the corner, and that's typically the first benchmark, the true benchmark of, where teams are at. You're able to kind of weed out the ones that are least likely to make the playoffs. And statistically, 85% of the teams that are in a playoff spot by American Thanksgiving make the playoffs. And doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room for teams outside of the picture to squeeze in. But it's all the more reason to be playing like every game is that game 7. And I was listening to some of the player interviews and media availability and Ryan Huska, and it just is so refreshing to hear a coach elaborate on things and not just be 4 words max and have some sort of snarky remark to everything. He's honest. He is, I don't want to say lighthearted, but he's sincere and means it. But he's not coming off in this commandeering way. Is that the right word I'm looking for? This overbearing way. And I think that's great because it helps the media. I'm sure he takes a similar approach with the locker room. A calm demeanor. You catch more bees with honey than you do vinegar. That is a very real analogy for this team. And I think that this start of the season does not define this team. Does it probably shift some mindsets? Yeah, I'm sure. I don't think that it's so hard for me to gauge this because I think that he is very well loved and liked in Calgary. I think that he has been such an integral part to this organization these last few years, especially on the penalty kill. He has blocked how many shots he has left his body on the line, how many times. It's going to be something that they have to make up for one way or another. And you don't think of those as significant losses because they're not star players. Same with Nikita Zadorov. No one else out there is throwing their body around the way that Zadorov does. Zadorov's 6'8" on skates. I think I'm making that up. He's 6'5", I think. But either way, he is someone that isn't afraid to shoot the puck. He can go out there, do his thing, get a little physical. So the Flames really need to look at this and from multiple angles and say, okay, what are we getting back? Do we have players within the organization to make a change that it'll be about as seamless transition to this as possible? Or is this a need that we need to address in other aspects, whether it's a different trade or free agency? So I think things are looking okay there. I really do think that this is it's a good thing. It is a very good thing for the Flames that are looking to not rebuild, but retool. I think that they have finally gotten permission from the owners to kind of be like, okay, you can start looking around. It's kind of like not like when you're car shopping and you just start looking because you got a budget when you're doing those things. But no, in all seriousness, I do think that the Flames are in an okay spot in terms of doing this. I think trading is the right move right now. I don't see the point in holding out and hoping you make the playoffs. I don't think it's worth the risk of, just losing these players for nothing. Do I think that us fans need to hold out for hope for a playoff spot? Of course. But we're not we don't have to make the hard decisions, thankfully. Coming up next, we are going to talk about Ryan Huska's media availability and some updates from practice, as well as Nashville's approach and season thus far. But before we do that, we are going to take a quick break here, and I'm going to talk to you all about the Sleeper app. A new NHL season brings all sorts of possibilities. Jacob Markstrom could win the Vezina, and Chris Tanev could finally hoist a Stanley Cup. And you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like McDavid, Ovechkin, Crosby, Connor Bedard will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus, minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Flames fans. You can win 100 times your money by playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you will get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That is code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with me today on Locked On Flames. As always, I'm Jess Belmosto, and you can follow me on Twitter, X, Instagram, anywhere, at Jess Belmosto, and you can follow the show on Instagram at Locked On Flames, and on X, Twitter, whatever, LO_Flames pod. I was interested to hear what Ryan Huska would have to say in his next media availability, because obviously, you're coming off a statement win, one that you very much needed, one that the whole room needed, and you're moving on to another Western Conference team without Mangiapane. But I wanted to hear, what were his standout moments? What did he like? Because I feel like we are so used to just 6 or 7 words, blunt, to the point, no elaborating, grumpiness, no sort of insight to anything. And the one of the many things that I like about Huska is how insightful he is and how he explains things. It's very helpful because I know that for me, I think that this, the skating was good. And then, maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I could have just been watching a better part of the game, right? But then he'll confirm that. And I'm like, okay, so I'm not crazy. He started off the interview by saying that the team had a better connection. And I would wholeheartedly agree. They played a strong 60-minute contest. And they dealt with adversity in the first 10 minutes of the game and were able to come out on top with a 6-3 win. It's been a while since they have scored a high number of goals. Ryan Huska goes on to talk about how, Seattle is a very good team and a fast team, and he thought that the Flames were able to kind of hang with them and challenge them, and they were skating well, and I don't want to say being a pest, but, they were competitive with each other. There is one thing, again, that I can appreciate. It is when a player or a coach really goes out, I don't even say goes out of his way. He makes it a point to address, a player that, maybe hasn't been playing up to the expectation or, is kind of in a slump. Huska he talked about Nazem Kadri today and his growing leadership role with the organization and the younger players. And he made a point to bring up his work ethic and how, he was off to like a slow start, but his work ethic never changed. And it would be different if, you saw a dip in the work ethic along with the points, because then you're looking at an entirely different problem. He has 4 points in the last 3 games, which I'm just going to sit here and tell you that's pretty decent considering where this team's offense was a week ago. But Huska talks about, Kadri here and says he's almost taking Connor Zary under his wing a little bit, where Connor makes the wrong play or a play that you could do something differently. And you always see Cods floating by him, and it's not, hey, you've got to do this. It's, hey, no problem. Next time, we've got it. I've seen a lot of growth in him in that regard. I think he's almost realizing, hey, I'm up there in age now, and I'm a leader here, and I have to help bring some of these younger guys along. I think he's done a good job of that. I would agree. I think every team has, those veterans that take guys under their wing. I mean, we saw it a little bit last season with Huberdeau and Pelletier, and it's a rite of passage at some point, but to have a Stanley Cup champion and a player like Kadri kind of take you under his wing, that means something. I think it's respect for the game, respect for each other, respect his teammates, and you want to leave this sport better than you found it. And, if you can help a kid get more comfortable and get more confident in his game at the NHL level, you're doing a good job. And he's assisted on the 2 debut goals from Zary and Pospisil, which you know what? I'm happy to see it. I'm looking at comments right now and it says, yeah, now we need him to score 2. That's why he makes $7 million, right? I suggest I listen to the episode where we discuss paying more than market value on July 1st. But anyways, I digress. It's very good to hear that things are transitioning well in that aspect. And even better news, Adam Ruzicka was back practicing with the team today. And back to bad news, Dylan Dubé is on the top line. I don't really have a lot of words for that other than Mangiapane. You did this yourself. Dylan Dubé still getting chances in the top 6 is absolutely wild to me. Even the middle 6 feels like charity work. But it's Huberdeau, Lindholm, and Dubé, followed by Zary, Kadri, and Sharon Govich, Pospisil, Backlund, and Coleman on that 3rd line. And the 4th line is Greer, Ruzicka, and Dewar. I like that line. I think that it's it's going to be an effective 4th line, much different from what we saw last year. And Uyghur and Anderson are your top pairing with Hanifin and Tanev, and Zadorov and DeSimone with your 3rd pairing, and Gilbert as your extra. And Markstrom was in the starters net. This is off topic, but I'm very interested to see what comes of this Oliver Shillington situation. I hope with every fiber of my being that he is okay and he is doing as well as he can be. And if he doesn't play another game for the Flames or another organization, and that means his mental health is, in tip-top shape, that's fine. You can't sit there and judge someone from walking away because, again, mental health is just as important as physical health. Now let's get back on track here. Sorry. The Flames are going up against a very fierce team. The Nashville Predators are one of like the most offensively dominant teams in the league. It feels like I was looking at their stats and Ryan O'Reilly has 7 goals. That's a lot of goals. Flames cannot relate, but no, I think that this team is offensively driven. They have good defense as well. And UC Saros, I feel like you're still getting good numbers out of him, but it's kind of back and forth there as well. I saw him, I mentioned on yesterday's show too, I saw him 2 or 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago actually, when the Predators were in Boston, and he looked good. He looked good, and then he'll go out and have kind of like a dumpster of a game. Not as bad as Jacob Markstrom some days, but it's definitely not great. I think one of the biggest downfalls that the Flames can kind of prey on here is how undisciplined they are. They do have some, what's the word I'm looking for? They have this weakness of taking too many penalties. Not like silly penalties where, the ref might see it and it's like, yeah, that's a borderline call. No, these calls are so avoidable. And if this team was just slightly more disciplined, then they wouldn't be doing that. And I think that their penalty kill is weaker than most teams in the league. And I would love to see the Flames power play get it back together and take advantage of that if that is something that arises. We will talk more about the Predators game tomorrow on Locked On Flames. I am very excited to see how this team looks tonight, and Ruzicka's back in the lineup. We're rolling with things. We are embracing these line changes and looking to build some consistency. Make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on YouTube as well. You can follow me on Twitter at Jess Belmosto. And until tomorrow, stay safe, stay hydrated, be kind, and remember to drink lots of fluids.